Cool. All right, awesome. So when we spoke last, I mentioned I've been working on a class essentially for agency owners to help them grow easier. And so what I wanted to cover today was that. And now I'm calling it a class, and clearly there's you and I, right? So it's a one-on-one. So I really want you to feel like this isn't, this is an opportunity for me to share what's
Mhm.
going on. And also if there's a place where you're like, raise your hand, because essentially I want to make sure that this is interactive and you're really able to connect and experience it in the way that you're looking to connect and experience it
Mhm.
inside of your company. So
Sure,
I'm
sure.
going to start sharing my screen, and then
Okay.
we'll hop into the the piece here. So what I'm calling this is grow your agency easier, and it's really that 10 to 20% year over year growth. Um, I've been in the advertising world for over 15 years, and over the last 10 years, I've been developing this consulting practice. And what I've identified is those that I've worked with that have applied principles and strategies like I'm talking about in here, that 10 to 20% has been a pretty consistently average number, right? So I just kind of wanted to give that as a precursor here before we go into it. So I'm going to ask this out to you after I read through it. I'd be curious to see if which one of these or all of these are something of where you want to go. So do you want strategies you could follow up so it's more consistent and effortless with those prospects and opportunities and low hanging fruit? Do you want to reduce or eliminate those clients that cost your agency more time and effort because you're working with someone that you might not maybe shouldn't, because they might not fit exactly, but it's kind of like, yeah, you're looking to grow your business. And so, there's all these different things where it's like, we'll take on, and then, the team that you're working with has all these other variables that end up working or just struggling with. So there's that. Or do you want to have more confidence in sales success when you hire a new salesperson? So which one of those, if not all of them, and again, this is more because what I'd love to understand a little bit more for you is which one might I be able to kind of steer the conversation or steer the presentation a little bit more towards.
Yeah. Um, these are all great questions and
Okay.
all, I guess I would imagine all necessary.
Hmm.
But as it relates to me, and the one that's the most relevant, I would say,
Hmm. Yeah.
is the middle one.
Okay.
Because here, I mean, I'm not sure if I told you last time in terms of how I get my clients, and it's really just been through word of mouth. I actually never do sales, and I hope to do it someday in the very near future.
Okay.
Because I do need to scale
Yeah.
and do more marketing. So yeah, it's really just been I just been very fortunate. So really number two is the one that yeah, because I don't follow up either, and I
Oh,
probably
wow.
should.
Okay.
I know I don't do a lot of things that agencies do, hence me being a small operation.
Okay.
So
Okay. Well, know too that, there's agencies that I've spoken with and have worked with now. And actually there's one in particular that about a year and a half ago we started working. And as I reflected back on that first year, I said, "Hey, where would you say you are?" And she kind of gave me the number of where her growth was. And so, it doesn't, you don't need to be this huge elaborate agency and operation. It's a matter of what can you grow through. And
mhm,
so if these are two particular areas, then let's discuss that here today.
mhm,
So really the key behind what we're going to be talking about today is reproducible process.
mhm,
So in order for you to be able to grow easier, you really need to be able to create a reproducible process. And so this is something that I've been really studying, evolving, refining over the last 10 years, right? So what we're going to cover today is we're going to discover what's held you back. So, you were mentioning there's certain things that you're doing or you should be doing, or, whatever it is. So, and or even like when you do want to do sales, or when you do want to do some of these other things to grow and scale your agency, we're going to talk about why you may or may not be doing some of those things, right?
mhm.
We're going to build on your current sales best practices. Well, in this case, obviously you're being able to close them. It's a matter of how do we fill maybe more people on the top of the funnel, right? Grow business with existing clients, those existing clients that are ideal. When I was looking at your website with, you have that really nice property, that real estate development property, like, are there other opportunities within that? Like, do they have other properties and developments around the area? And is there something that you could start to stay, whatever that might look like, right? But that's kind of the idea of, I'll talk about some strategies with that. Strategies to capture attention faster. So one of the reasons that sometimes people or agency owners, or quite frankly, entrepreneurs in general, don't follow up or do some of those things is there's so many things. It's like, well, I need to figure out what am I going to say before I call them, or what am I going to follow up with? They might not be sure what those things are. So we're going to talk about a strategy for you being able to capture the attention faster, and then tracking to more easily forecast. So you can start to see, I'm going to talk about leading and lagging indicators of how and where. And these are simple items that you can focus on that will give you the opportunity of more confidence of where you want to grow. All right. So let me just kind of give you since I mentioned the key is the reproducible process, let me kind of talk a little bit about my progression over the years. So on the left, the far left, this process was, this was Lawnscapers. This was my first bid into entrepreneurship with my buddy Jason, who's on the left. And we basically started pushing our lawnmowers up and down the street in our neighborhood. And then all of a sudden we started picking up clients, and we ended up getting up to 35 clients. And I remember when I was in college, well, when we were both in college, one of the things that we talked about, or, as he was working at he was going to a different college than I was. And so we kind of split up our business. And so I said, I wanted to create a reproducible process. So I developed a lawn care guide for how the employees, or how I cut grass, and how they should as well. I had a tracking sheet that they were able to keep track of, so that I knew how much to pay them and how I could pay them. And so I really started out with this whole thing of like, there's still a book for Lawnscapers on how we ran our business. Then I moved into accounting, or not accounting, but account executive. Like, so that's me at my front door. Essentially, that was my first day of work. I was actually living with my parents at the time. And that was my first day of work. And I started to get into tracking. And, fast forward a number of years, I'm at one of the television stations, and I created this dashboard. And this dashboard allowed me to see which prospects I needed to follow up with, how that was actually helping me to get and achieve my budget, and so on and so forth. And it was a two-pager, basically. And I printed it out every day. And I would be like, okay, this is what I need to focus on tomorrow. This is how I need to do these things. And this is how close I am to my budget. So what else can I do to get there? And I remember my manager called me in one day and said, Mark, anyone who's using your dashboard is at budget. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool, right? Because it was like, it gave you the chance to focus on what you needed to focus on, as opposed to trying to do too many different things. Fast forward another few years. So I'm actually at a Tony Robbins. This is actually a Tony Robbins training. So the circle here is Tony Robbins. And
That's
then
what I thought it was. I saw him.
where
Is
I'm
that
at.
Tony
Yeah.
Robbins?
Yep. Yep. So this was actually coach training when I was actually applying to be a Tony Robbins coach. So
Wow.
we went to UPW, Unleash the Power Within. So this is backstage of a UPW. And we all had a chance to like, all right, we're going to take a photo with Tony. And so we did that. And after I got hired in the organization, I created a reproducible referral process. And I became the #2 referring coach at Tony Robbins. There's 100 global coaches. I was asked to present how I created this system to the coaches. So again, I think about reproducible process. And then the final piece is, there's me in the Ecuadorian Amazon rainforest. I'm next to John Perkins. He's written a number of different books, which is great. And you could see the size of the tree behind me, right? That's a huge tree.
That's a tree.
That's a trunk of a tree. Just to give you an idea, like
the whole thing in the background.
the whole thing. So you can imagine those are 300 years old.
Jeez. Wow.
Yeah. So this is me. I was working at an ad agency, and I was making cold calls while I was there. How did I do that? I created a script, and it had if this, then that rules. Like, okay, well, when you call them, so I had a team that followed the scripts, and when they asked these questions, they replied with this. They sent this email. They updated my CRM in a certain way, and then I came back, and that momentum was continued. So these are the things that I've been developing and doing and using. I don't just talk about this, I'm doing this. And so I'm constantly looking at how can I refine my own reproducible process and do that. So what I ultimately did was I took the ultimate road test. And this is me in my Sprinter van in California. And this just looked like such a beautiful day, or it was a beautiful day. And my buddy was like, hey dude, let's take a picture here. And just looking back, and ultimately I took my business on the road and ran it out of this van for a year. This was my home
Mhm.
for a year. So I took it on my business and my reproducible process on the ultimate road test. Okay. So the next thing, the philosophy is really to flick one domino and 12 fall. When I created that reproducible process inside of, I mean, all of those things, it was, I did this one thing and then 12 other things automatically happened. And so that's really the concept of what we're going to be discussing here today. So the steps today are to start with what you have. You know, I'm not here to say throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's start with what you have. Visualize the steps in front of you. When you could see something, when you could see what I call the invisible, you could start to move and adjust and see what else it might look like. And then we want to apply it with manageable steps. So anytime you're going to see these stairs, we're talking about one of the sales roadmap steps. Now let's talk about what's held you back. And this is something that I learned many, many years ago. And it's the 4 levels of understanding, or 4 levels of learning. And level 1 is unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't even know that you don't know it. So there's something about quantum mechanics that you have no idea that you don't even know about, right? And so you have unconscious incompetence there. Well, as you continue to study more and more of that, you become consciously incompetent. You know what you need to do, but you know that you're not good at it. And I put in parentheses yet, right? Then level 3 is conscious competence. You know what you need to do, and you have to think about what you're doing to get good at it. And here's where the majority of agency owners live, which is level 4, unconscious competence. You're clear and great about the things that you do, and you don't even have to think about it. So the challenge is anytime you want to start to work with anyone else or bring someone else on or do something else in your business, you're like, you have to physically like think about how do you explain what it is that you want them to do, because you just automatically have, like, you just automatically do it, right? Because you have unconscious competence. And so what I talk with a lot of my clients about is when we could take that unconscious competence of everything that you've been doing, put it down into more of a documentation. Then if you hire someone that has conscious competence or conscious incompetence, because they don't even know what they don't know, and they know that they're not good at it, right? You could start to help them see the steps that they could follow so they create their own reproducible process. All right, is this making sense so far?
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So what we want to do is really build on best practices. And I look at these main, what are these, 6, 7 main areas of best practices: focus, listen, simplify, add value, differentiate, track, and then automate. And most people want to get to the step number 7 first, because it's like automation will help me in so many different ways. Well, if you don't know what you want to automate, automation is going to actually cause you more harm than good, right? So focus. One of the biggest things that I talk with my clients about is here, focus on one industry or category. You're doing something in the real estate market right now. Like, is that helping, or is that an area that you could see more growth in? So again, I'm just inviting you to take a look at that today. I mean, I know that you have another couple case studies on there as well, but decide where your agency really excels. Review those clients that you love working with, because the clients you love working with, you're going to want to work with more of them. So instead of just trying to take on any clients, it's who are those clients that you really enjoy, love working with, and then reviewing your leads list. Like, what are some of those things? If we're talking about real estate per se, instead of you thinking about 150 names that you have in LinkedIn or in email or whatever, think about the 20 or the 10 in real estate that you could pursue.
Mhm.
And you know what I kind of share here, and you see the asterisk here on the left, is after 9 months, this is something that I did as I was working at an agency, and after 9 months, I closed $900,000 in new business
Well,
because there was a very specific industry that the agency excelled in, that they were really good at understanding what they needed to do, and there was a huge leads list that I could follow up with or call, right? So it's kind of just this opportunity to say, by focus, you could really make a difference. Listen. The next thing is just really, there's so much talking out there. You know, we talked about social media and everything a little while ago. The key is, how do you listen? You know, and so I'm going to talk about a couple different ways of what that looks like. But setting up calls or meetings with your best clients, what are some of the things that they liked about working with you, or like about working with you, or whatever those ideas that you could really begin to glean about. Well, I really liked how you approached this. I really liked the way that you did this branding, and I really liked how you did this, or whatever. Watch their social media. Like, what are they saying? What are they talking about? Even subscribing to their newsletter. Another key thing that you could even do is have a third party make client calls. Like, hey, I'm calling on behalf, and this is what I'd like to talk to you about. You're a valued client, and I'd like to really make sure that we can help kind of understand and see what do we do well, and then what can we continue to improve upon. And I did this a few years ago, just kind of on a whim with one of my clients that I had been working with for years. And we were talking, and I said, hey, why don't I make some calls for you? And I called, I said, obviously you trust me well enough to say, all right, like, these are your clients, so I totally get it, right? And I want to be mindful of that. And I said, send me over some emails, and I will reach out to them, and I'm going to give you feedback on what they all said, so that you could start to take that and glean, and then begin to start to create that as some of your messaging and all of those other things. So what I did as well was I actually made a very specific focus to a very specific industry. And what I heard in a number of calls that I made to marketing directors and things was that I'm a one-man marketing band. I'm a one-man
marketing what?
a one-man marketing band.
Band,
B-A-N-D.
oh. Sorry, for some reason you've been crystal clear this whole time, but for some reason I just couldn't get that one word. Band, sorry.
That's okay. Sorry. That's okay. So that's, so ultimately it's like I'm a one-man marketing band. So what I did after hearing that, I made 500, I put a challenge to do 500 cold calls. Now, I'm not suggesting that anyone do that. I'm just saying I wanted to really, my goal was to listen and hear what they had to say. So out of all those calls, I kept on hearing this phrase. And so what I did was actually put together an email. This is kind of I mocked it up later, and clearly there's no prospected industry, right? But my subject line was, are you a one-man marketing band? What happened very interestingly was that, and I tracked how long deals took, I reduced the client close time from 9 months to 2 by sending this email, because there was a gentleman that signed up for a meeting with me and said, you nailed it, Mark. I'm a one-man marketing band. I need your help. I could do Google Analytics, but I'm not quite sure exactly. They're constantly changing, and I need to be this like almost full time. I'm like, well, that's why you hire us, right? And so by that, he knew, like, we had 3 meetings, and they became a client. And coincidentally, that was in 2017. 5 years later, they're still a client.
Nice.
500 calls, right? I probably heard this same phrase 5 different times. And so that one email has yielded business for the last 5 years.
Nice. Okay.
Okay. Listen internal. What are the things that your team, and I know that you have more of a remote team, but what in the internal team, what do they need to know? And so, this is something that I talked about with creating this internal meeting prep form. So what are the questions that your team needs to know, so that anytime they're going to be putting together their steps, you can have already anticipated, well, they need Google Analytics, they need this, they need access to this, they need access to this, or whatever those things are that they need to know about the strategy or whatever. You could start to put together documentation, so that all that you do is you pull up this, all right, okay, you answering the question. And what happened is the agency owner that I was working with, he called me in one day. He's like, do you have any idea how many people were in that meeting? And I'm like, yeah, there were 8 people in that meeting. Yeah, that's a lot of capital, right? If we're talking an hour or 2 meeting, and we're talking about 8 different staff members, that's 16 man hours that I had in a meeting. And I was like, whoa, man, that like blew my mind, right? To think about that. I'm like, wow, I'm paying the 16 man hours to have them in this internal meeting. So I said, well, what could I do on the front end? Why don't I put together an internal meeting prep form, and I could send it to all those 8 people and say, here's all the questions that you typically ask. I might not answer all of them, yet here is at least a good start. This is what the campaign structure is, so on and so forth. And so you could really take that, you could really listen for what the internal team, right? and then be able to really make sure that those team meetings are that much more effective and valuable. Next thing, simplify. I like to use a phrase called the persona power of three. And years ago, I heard a phrase, most people think in terms of 1, 2, 3, many. Beyond three, it becomes very overwhelming, right? So when you look at most branding companies and when you look at just most brands, right? Like it was so funny because after I kind of started learning and seeing this about the power of three, it was like an eye opener. When I was working at Robbins, we did coaching, events, and products. Those are the three things that they offered, right? But like, there's so many different things. You'll start noticing this now. It's the reticular activating center part of your brain. When you start noticing three, you'll start seeing threes everywhere. So I said, all right, well, what are the persona power of three? So those are challenges, characteristics, and goals. The more challenges you understand, and when you can simplify those challenges down into a couple different things, what I started out this conversation in are the top three challenges that I solve for the clients that I work with. Right? So it's either follow-up, it's either sales process, or it's really kind of hiring new salespeople. Those are the three main challenges that I've recognized that agency owners are. So I'm not concerned about all these other things that they may be struggling with. If you've got HR issues, that's a whole other thing. I'm not going to help you with that, right? If it's related to sales, if it's related to those three aspects, that's a challenge that I know this program can solve. And so I share this with you to say, I don't just talk about this, I'm doing this, like I'm utilizing all the strategy, I don't want to even say, yeah, I mean, the strategies, the techniques inside of this to communicate the value of how this can help and grow for you. Characteristics. What are the characteristics of the different people that you're talking to? You know, as you're looking at the persona, you have, in some cases, you know, if you've got this real estate developer, you've maybe got the marketing company that has or not the market, but the marketing, you know, person in the organization, and then there's the decision maker, right? So you may have to talk with her in order to talk to the decision maker. So how can you separate the differences of the characteristics of the marketing person in the organization versus the decision maker? And then what are the goals? Like, what are the real goals that they're looking to accomplish? So, you know, I like to look at clarifying in minutes, qualification, disqualification questions. When I was making those cold calls from the Ecuadorian Amazon rainforest, the team that I had calling for me was, do you struggle with this challenge, or this challenge? If they said none of them, then it was, hey, do you mind if we just add you to the newsletter? Because we can't help you if those aren't an issue for you right now. You don't have pain there. So this isn't something that we can work with you on. So instantly they were disqualified because they weren't a good candidate, because we would have spent hours and you know, many meetings trying to figure out, well, how can we maybe help you, versus, do you struggle with this, or this? And they're the root challenges that they're facing. Then that allows you to focus your efforts on the right people. So again, think about those 10, you know, if you had 150 people in your database and you've got 10 in real estate, and you ask the question to 10 of them and 2 of them say yes, now you focus on those 2, because 2 is exactly where you and your agency can really thrive. And then the prospects can really see how your agency can impact them. So you can capture their interest in minutes, not hours. Like my goal was to, in under 5 minutes in some of those calls, it was like to get an appointment and to see whether or not they were qualified or disqualified. So that's another piece. Add value. This is a really fun favorite piece of mine here. So send info that they can see. So as you focus on an industry, you know, and I'm just going to use this example of the colleges, right? And education. So there's colleges and then there's trade schools. And we know that colleges are different than trade schools, right? So when you start looking at it, if we're looking at the characteristics, colleges have a VP of marketing and a trade school has a director of marketing. Now, those are 2 little subtle differences. Yet if you're going to do a LinkedIn campaign and you want to focus on more colleges, you're going to be looking for more VPs of marketing directors versus directors of marketing inside of trade schools. So it's these little distinctions, right, that can really help. And then you have the goals within each title. So colleges are really just about branding. They need to get the message out there. They're looking, they don't necessarily need all, I mean, yes, they need enrollments, but it's not as much as trade school where they're all about the cost per lead. So when you could speak to a trade school about cost per lead and you could talk to a college about branding, you're talking in the same industry, but you have two very specific different language specifics that are going to approach that. So you can deepen and develop relationships over time. And again, this is a great fun example that I literally sent out. And I had about 30 different trade schools that were really engaging with a lot of the stuff that I was sending. And I happened to come across this Mike Rowe on Good Morning America talking about the power of going to trade schools. So what I did was I took this YouTube, I thought, oh yeah, I mean, it was YouTube about Good Morning America. And I said, I don't know if you, and I sent this to all the trade school directors of marketing. And I said, I don't know if you saw this or not. You can forward this email and this link to your sales team. And if they have anyone who's on the fence of going to a trade school or not, they can watch this video. It had nothing to do with the agency that I was working at. It had, and it had everything to do about adding value to them, to a very specific audience. So again, I wasn't trying to send this to the 980 different people that were in the HubSpot. It was 30 that were engaging that, I could really specifically focus on that would really add value to them in the way that was going to actually really connect to them. Next one, differentiate. How can you really make sure that you can get clarity through the different fields? So, as you start looking at lead categories, what are the industry types? What are the titles of the roles? Like we just talked about, there's a director of marketing versus a VP of marketing. Sounds subtle, but it's a big difference. Status stages. Are you getting people in here through marketing qualifications or sales qualifications? I know that, you're saying right now it's a lot of referrals or word of mouth. Are you going to do you want to do a marketing campaign, or do you want to start to do some outreach in your own way? I'm not saying cold calls, and because I actually almost deter people from making a bunch of cold calls just because it's very ineffective. Who's picking up the phone from a number that they don't recognize anymore? Very, 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 very few. So I'm using some old example. I mean, I don't want to say old examples, but just I'm saying this can be universal. This could be, you could reach out to them in LinkedIn. You could do all these different things. And the key here is to really follow up with the prospects that are most likely to buy. So you could start to take a look at where they are in the funnel and who's engaging and who isn't. Then a really big thing for me is really about tracking and leading and lagging indicators. Most agency owners are focused on the lagging indicators, sales, right? We need sales, we need sales. And at the same time, when you're hiring or when you're bringing someone new on, most agency owners have gone through the pain of hiring someone for them to only realize that they didn't necessarily work out. And it would typically take 9 to 12 months because guess what? In the agency world, a lot of deals take time. So you're sitting here paying the sales guy that may or may not be working out. And it's like, well, how do you know? And you've got to waste the salary of a year almost in order to figure out whether or not it really worked. Well, leading indicators are one of those key factors that can help on the front end, because leading indicators are, I made 500 cold calls in a month. That didn't generate sales that month. But when I shared that with the basically the sales manager at the time, he could see, all right, well, that's activity, right? That's a leading indicator. So these are some of the things that you could take a look at and start to share, because as you start looking at the cold calls made or the Facebooks or the website, or I actually sent out some Loom videos where I actually did like, hey, I'm here on your site and these are some things that I thought about. And, so I was trying different things to see how and where I can engage with the prospects the most. Then there's the lagging indicators. How long did it take in order for that contact to close? So I had the time from contact to close and time from the first appointment to close. So I could start to see, okay, well, it took, 5 months to go from my first appointment to close, but it took, 9 months for the initial contact to get those 4 months through to get that appointment, then 5 months to close it. So again, these are just like little things that can help you really understand that. because when the team can give you these quarterly recaps, or you can give yourself a recap on it, you can start to see where you're spending your time in the most valuable way. And you can analyze it. Like one of the things that I actually sent after one of the quarters was I told the sales manager, I'm like, look, I've been making so many of these cold calls. I'm like, this is very an ineffective use of my time. So here's what I'm going to try in the next quarter. So I'm going to change my leading indicators from calls to, going to more events, or something like that, right? So you could start to anticipate and see, is it working or is it not working? And then the last thing, step number 7 is basically automate. And, again, this is that piece where you do one piece and all of the other, the momentum carries. Capture, writing out the processes helps you get what's in your head down on paper. Very, very, very few agency owners that I've ever talked to have ever had anything really written or documented down for how they go about their process or their sales process. Applying it, testing it manually, like, hey, we'll have some emails, we'll have some of these scripts, we'll have these pieces, and could you follow what you're talking about? And then as you start to manually do this, it's like, oh, well, there's a huge gap here. Great. Let's identify that gap. Let's fill that gap and let's update the details, right? And then this is something where you could just basically say, hey, I created this. This is a way to see the invisible. So what we talked about here today is discover what's held you back, build on current best practices, what's been working, what hasn't been working, grow business with existing clients, strategies to capture attention faster with those, simple questions, and then tracking to more easily forecast. So the way that I kind of look at this is traction control, right? It's a way of adding on accountability and someone kind of looking over your shoulder to help and work through that process with you. And, the way that I've really kind of designed this whole thing is annually to really focus in on those main aspects we just talked about: focus, listen, simplify, add value, differentiate, track, and automate. And each of these things are obviously going to take a little different pieces for each different client. But this is kind of an overall general idea of what you could kind of anticipate of how that would work over a year, essentially. So this is most of the entrepreneurial paths. It's loopy and it's going all these different directions. And so have you ever seen the book or read the book, The E-Myth? It's called The Entrepreneur Myth. And I thought it was like the E-Myth. I thought like the electronic myth or something, but it's a story about this. Michael Gerber wrote this book on basically this woman who has a pie shop, and she's, she loves baking pies. What she's doing though is she's baking pies. She's sweeping the floors. She's doing the bookkeeping. She's making sure that right? She's doing all these things as opposed to putting together a system and a process where someone can handle that and someone can handle that. And here's what we do for, like, when we open up the store, here's what we do to close the store. So she could have someone come in to open, she could have someone in to close, and so on and so forth. So she, that's one of the examples in here. And I had an opportunity years ago to actually meet him. And so, this was a book that I read very early on as I was starting my business. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is exactly a lot of the things that I'm talking about. So this is really, working. This is based all in 15 years of advertising sales. It's organized into a repeatable process. It's customized to your agency. It's designed to be turnkey and then help you to see your 10 to 20% growth. And then, really the idea here is not wasting your valuable time trying to figure out what it's really taken me, what has basically been 3 decades to organize. Like, I mean, it's taken me the last 10 years to really organize this into a system. And again, I'm happy to even have another follow-up meeting and kind of go over more of the details if this is something that you would really align with and where you would like to go, so that you could stick with what you love doing. And, I can help support and really work and do like customization with you. So that's really the overview here. And so, like I said, if we want to talk about, doing a little bit of a call there, I'm happy to dig in there. So how did that connect to you? What were some of the things that you saw? And, would you be interested in talking more about this? And I could tell you a little bit more about the program. So, financially, like what the commitment would look like and how this could work. I could build this out. I have some clients that will just do it, as a one-time piece, or if you want to break it out over quarters, we can talk about that. But let me just let me kind of open it up here. What are you hearing inside of all of that, and how does What maybe stood out to you the most?
Yeah, thank you, by the way, it was very helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, where do I start? So a lot of the concepts that you went over are definitely familiar, and they were a great refresher reminder
Hmm.
that there's a lot of things that I do need to address and focus on and improve in. And it's kind of like a little, it's kind of motivational too. It's like, okay, you know, it's possible to do all these things. You know, what's been, it's kind of like a mini wake up call in a way too. When we're discussing things like, sales, growing the business, and kind of visualizing these numbers. Visualization is such a powerful thing. When we're talking about numbers and
Hmm.
metrics and forecasting and what's possible, right? So it's a nice reminder of like what's possible. Yeah, so I don't know, like I guess in terms of like how it could apply to me and like your program and everything.
Hmm.
um yeah, definitely not right now for sure, because um yeah, it's just not a good time. However, um there could be a possibility of working together in the future. There's a certain couple things that I personally need to I guess kind of overcome, just kind of I'm working on from a personal standpoint, like a personal development standpoint.
Okay.
It's almost like, before I engage in anything that's related to growth, for a company, or that's kind of involving the team, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of implications of that. It's like I need to better myself in certain areas so that I'm prepared to do that even. So that's why I'm working with another coach right now.
Oh,
I
you are?
think I
Okay.
did mention that,
I don't
right?
know. I don't know if I didn't know that or not. Okay.
I may have mentioned that.
You
Maybe
you
not.
may
Maybe
you may have. It might
maybe
have been
not
our
actually.
first. It might have been on our first call.
Yeah, maybe in our first call, yeah, because I remember you talking about coaching, and it's like I
Hmm.
always get excited about coaching
Yeah.
and all about self-improvement. So I always talk about it, but I may have not, I may not have.
Yeah.
So in terms of accountability, we actually do cover a wide variety of things, not just business,
Great.
but a lot of it, maybe over half of it does involve business in terms of like
All right.
setting goals and holding me accountable, right? So I'll have these goals. So I do have that sort of in place right now, um, as well as I don't know if I told you, my brother has an agency too that is really successful actually,
Yeah.
and he's sort of like another coach. And we're the complete opposite ends of the spectrum. We do sort of the same similar thing,
Okay.
but the sheer scale of what he does, and then the clients that he has and the impact he has in a certain like region in the world,
Yeah.
like he's magazines and stuff.
Nice.
um so he's been a great resource for me as well. So I guess long story short, right now I'm pretty good in terms of like having that sort of mentor and guidance.
Mhm.
I kind of I love that slide about you know people just not knowing what they don't know.
Oh
And
yeah, the four
I
levels.
love
Yep.
that. It's so true. And I was that
Hmm.
person. And I feel like I'm that. Which one you hit those four? I consciously know that I don't know a lot of things.
Yeah.
Was that the second one?
So that's consciously incompetent. Yeah.
Incompetent.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I know I have some competence in many
Oh,
things,
for
but
sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
I just forgot which which
Yeah.
one.
Like if you think so really there's unconscious and conscious, right? So like if you kind of make it as simple as that, there's
Yeah,
unconscious
right.
and then conscious.
Competence.
Okay. So
Inconscious.
there's
Yeah.
unconscious incompetence.
Right.
Then the next one is conscious. So unconscious to conscious, right? Incompetence to competence,
Right. Right.
right? So yeah, again, then it's conscious incompetence. So wait, unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence,
Yes. I definitely am
conscious
there.
competence, and then unconscious competence. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I want to get to unconscious competence. Right.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I've been in this game, I guess, at least in my small little way, for about 20 years or so, right?
Okay.
So there's a little bit of overlap amongst all four, right?
Yep.
But I'm still not, fully, and we all want to get to the unconscious competence, right?
Hmm.
So I totally believe in that. And especially within the last maybe 7 years, I've been really focusing on the whole self-improvement. I've been
Great.
involved in this. I don't know if I told you, I also sell insurance.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have this team, and then we have these regular meetings about sales, and I'm not as active anymore, but they've been very helpful as well in terms of just like human psychology and just
Hmm.
how to approach how to mirror all these little techniques, right?
Yeah,
And just mindset building too, in
sure.
terms of like seeing what's possible, what's not. A lot of people just don't believe that they can achieve a certain level or a certain standard when in fact we're so much more capable of what we think we can do, right?
Absolutely.
So
Well,
so yeah, yeah.
yeah, and the key here is having the map of
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
what to
true.
do, and then being able to break it down,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
That's what you definitely have a great structure in place, to kind of assemble all these pieces together, right?
Yeah.
To kind of
Yeah.
be a guide.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if there's one thing that I would say, I mean, if you're working with your existing coach, and look, I realize there's a client I started working with late last year. He and I have known each other for 6 years. And he's like, Mark, I've always known that we were going to work together. I just wasn't sure when. And we were starting to talk, and he was sharing with me where he's at in his agency. And so we started working together, and like I said, it was 6 years. It was a 6-year relationship that I worked on. Because one, I appreciate what he's doing and where he's at and everything. And so to me, that I get the agency world is different than most other sales. I mean, you could say that
Yeah.
about, it's different than insurance. It's different because, insurance, you're making these calls, you're doing these follow-ups. I mean, a lot of the same principles could
It's
essentially
different.
even apply to your
Mhm.
insurance business as well. Because what ended up happening for me was I actually created a reproducible process. I was actually selling for 4 companies at the same time.
Mm,
And then COVID hit, and I'm like, I was working on 100% commission on all of them. And
mm,
everyone was like, I don't know what we're doing. And I just said, I cannot continue to work at these companies for 100% commission when no one knows what's happening. So like I did for about a month or so where I'm just like, hey, how are you doing? Like, and I created this organizational structure that I knew, okay, I'm working for this company now. These are the steps I need to follow. Oh, I'm working over here now. These are the things I need to follow up. So as you're working with your coach, again, I know that there's a lot of personal development pieces inside of it, and I get that. And sales is very, rejection oriented, right? I mean, if you really think about it, a lot of people avoid it because they want to avoid rejection. So, I totally get it. And so if you're looking at where you may choose to focus some of your efforts, if you are looking at growing and scaling, where can you start to do a bit more sales? How can you do a little bit more focus there? And, where do you want to go? Who are some of the clients that you enjoy? Like I said, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you to, look at the guide. And then also, as we're talking about the focus here today, focus on an industry that you really want to understand and get to know, because you're going to go deep there. Like I realize that I understand the agency world very well. So why would I not go deep there and speak with as many agency owners as I can to help them? Because I know the business. They know that I know the business. I don't have to, like, I could tell you that I spent 15 years in it, so from some of the terms I'm using, from some of the things, and so there's just this intrinsic understanding that I understand you,
yeah. You have
right?
empathy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, for you with the coach, awesome. I'm glad you're working with this coach. Um, and like I said, if you're, because you asked a question right after, it's like, hey, it's possible, which is great. And right before that, you said, where do you start? And to me, it's kind of like beginning to start to get all of these things from like what you're doing and being able to start to make calls, LinkedIn requests, whatever, start to put yourself and your agency and what it is that you're offering and get more clear on that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. That's a good reminder. Like everything that you said was so true. Like it really did apply. It's like everything that all your bullet points were extremely relevant to what I do,
Mhm.
So, I mean, great presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So,
So, I mean, the other thing that I'll just mention to you as well, you know, just because you mentioned it, I don't know, you mentioned you have a brother that has an agency as well. I mean, if he's at all interested in growing and scaling, I have the biggest agency that I'm essentially working with right now is they're doing over 10 million in top line
mm,
revenue.
wow, nice.
So I don't know again where he's at. I'm typically not working with, someone who's doing 50 million bucks or anything like that. Like I'm on the, I'd say from the 100,000 to million to 10, like kind of multiples
Mhm.
of 10.
Sure.
So if this would be something of value, I could send you over a link because I actually now have my website updated
Mhm.
for people to download the must knows guide and or just tell him I'm happy to set up a meeting and go over this presentation with him as well to see where it might resonate with him because if he's looking to
Yeah.
grow some salespeople or whatever. And then one of the things that I like to do is I have a little bit of a referral system. So if he would end up purchasing, we would have an opportunity. I can gift you a few sessions. So
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Thank you for that.
mhm,
Yeah. One thing that through the years that I've learned and believe in now is like, initially I thought in my head, yeah, he's okay, I think. However, you just never know, right? Who could be a potential client.
mhm,
And initially I'm like, no, I don't know. He builds and creates businesses like that. He's amazing. He scales fast. And
mm,
he's done some pretty cool stuff. But then, like again, going back to you just never know. Anybody could be a potential client. So yeah, if you can just
yeah.
send me. Yeah, oh, there we go.
There we go. So that's my so I still have my old site. I just had to put a subdomain on it right now while I'm working on finalizing some of the pages. But um, you know,
Okay,
I'm rebranding it all with my art and
that's cool how you tie that all together.
yeah, yeah. And again, there's the reproducible process and that's really what I'm helping them to do.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'll send it to him for sure.
Okay.
Every now and then he's always open to just, it's like hearing another outside, not well, just different viewpoint, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll forward it to him.
Yeah. No, that's perfect.
Yeah. And just something I guess to point out about me again, going back to where I'm at, which I don't know, just for whatever it's worth. Like
Sure.
I like again, I've never done sales for I don't think I'm trying to think if I have ever done a no, I've never done any sort of sales. Zero. It's crazy,
Oh,
within the
wow.
last since '05 when I officially started freelancing, and then '07 I officially incorporated. Actually, officially started freelancing in '01,
Hmm.
actually. So anyway, so it's one of those things where like if my referral business and just word of mouth, just very passive, actually zero effort sort of marketing is kept me sustainable. What would happen if I just simply started posting a couple blog posts or, I'm just curious to see how that will do,
Yeah.
as a next step, and then maybe learning from that. So, I guess this is kind of also I'm trying to say that um, I kind of want to experiment a little bit,
Hmm.
and know myself, see what I can do organically and gather some data, gather some experience,
Yep.
which would, let's say if we do work together in the future, it could help in whatever program or structure or path,
Yeah.
you know, that's created. So
Yeah. I mean, look, the thing about it is you've got to start to start.
yeah,
And
that's the whole
you, you
problem. Yeah.
you've created a business out of a referral system. That's awesome, right? Like that's amazing. So how can you take that to the next level. And the other thing too is eliminate as many variables as possible. That's
Yeah.
why, and it's, look, I get it. It literally took me 10 years to really hone in on saying I'm working with agency owners specifically, right? Because it's scary to say I'm gonna only focus here. Because then, well, what about this opportunity? What about this opportunity, right?
I'm in that space right now. I'm in that place right now. Where I'm
Yeah.
like, should I specialize? You know, yeah.
Yeah. So what I would say is, look, where you can do this, and I heard this, I Love Marketing many years ago. I love marketing.com. They had meetup group quite very close to where I used to live. And they had these 8 profit activators. And the first one was select a single target market, one at a time. So it's not to say that you can't eventually take that and grow it. By you focusing, and I know I'm just using real estate because I know that that was one of the case studies that you had on your site, or that development project. I don't know if you want to call it real estate or whatever, but
Israel, yeah, yeah.
yeah, real estate. So like by focusing there, what you do is you start to really get clear on what are the needs inside of the real estate market. Like, just like I'm talking about the agency, like what are the needs that really are there? And I will say, Eric, like I literally started this presentation began at the beginning of this year. I've spent 6 months in development to get it to here.
Mm,
And I
mm,
spent 4 months late last year understanding who Michael was, an agency owner.
mhm,
And I said, okay, if I'm going to focus, I can't be focusing on Michael, the agency owner, and this other coach or this other creative person, or, you know, this other person or this other person. Like, let me get very clear. Like, I got really clear on what Michael looks like. And there's a Michael that wants to grow. There's a Michael that wants to scale. And Michael that wants to scale has different needs. He needs a team, and he needs to take that unconscious incompetent or unconscious competence and put it down so that he can take all of his best practices and hire a sales team that could begin to implement it using leading and lagging indicators, right? And so like I'm kind of sharing this with you to say he's got different needs than the sales process. Like sales process, let's just get you clear on what steps you're taking in the sales. Now you haven't, and there's no judgment here at all, you haven't taken any of those sales steps. So like
no,
for you, you just beginning to practice and mess. I mean, it's going to be a little bit of mess. Like it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be clean. And you've got to start, start to start.
yeah,
So, I invite you to just kind of, get a little bit more clear, like think about, and just, I don't know if you're a journaler and all, but I would journal more about the clients you've really enjoyed working with over the last several years, and then start to categorize. Oh, this was in real estate. Oh, this was in insurance. Oh, this was in whatever, healthcare. Oh, this was in personal development. Whatever it may look like. And can they afford it? I mean, I think that's the other thing that I really had to understand as well, as I was adjusting this, because I wanted to help a lot of different people, and a lot of different people really needed my help and they couldn't afford me.
mm-hmm,
And so I felt bad because, like, all right, well, I know I can help them. And then, they're still kind of new and growing and all of that other stuff. So, that factors into it as well. If you're talking about real estate, clearly there's a lot of money in real estate at this point. I mean, we'll see what's going to happen here over the next whatever couple years, because we've been in a boom for the last 14 years, and typical real estate goes in cycles of 7. So anyhow,
yeah,
real estate could pay you, right? Coaches might not be able to.
mm,
Coaches love what they do. They in most cases they're not necessarily making a ton of money,
yeah,
right? So then you're specifically working on a niche that can't afford your services, and that doesn't serve you or them, right?
yeah,
Because they may trust you in putting their last few dollars in, and when those last few dollars are in, it's like, oh my gosh, where am I going to go from here,
mm-hmm,
right? And so there's a lot of pressure on you as well. So anyhow, I kind of share a couple of those other points with you as
No,
well.
appreciate it. Yeah. No, great insight,
Yeah.
seriously.
Thanks. Yeah.
Um, in a lot, just another big takeaway from this is just I gotta get my butt moving and just because I'm like just kind of head down, just working because I do a lot of the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not really focusing, thinking about it. I'm not even thinking much. I mean, I have these plans to rebrand and just kind of start marketing, but I just keep pushing it back.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, just start, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Mm.
I'll leave you with this because yeah, we're right at the top of the hour here, and I want to be mindful of the time. And
Okay.
um, um, an exercise that I did. Have you ever heard the phrase "eat the frog"?
Oh, yeah, I did. But I
It's
forgot. Yeah.
basically like do the thing that you don't want to do, but you know you need to do it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
So when I
yeah.
made those cold calls, I was still doing like account management work. So I knew the rest of my day was going to be all over the place, handling this client or they're working on this thing and I knew I needed to do sales. So the very, 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 very reverse thing that I did, I came in the office, put my bag down on my chair, didn't even sit in my chair. Like this was my morning routine, right? And I went into one of the offices, pulled up my HubSpot. What calls am I making? From 8 to 9:30, I made calls. At 9:30, they had this flavored water up at the lunchroom, and they would have like cinnamon infused apple or like pear cucumber or whatever. And it was like it was always different each day, and it was like refreshing, like when you have water that's in like ice with like
Good.
really cool different fruits or vegetables. It's like, man, like cucumber water is amazing when it's cold,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And it's fresh. And so at 9:30, that was my reward.
Uh,
Like it sounds like a simple thing, yet I was like, I looked forward. I'm like, I've earned this freaking water.
mm,
So I said that was for an hour and a half. For you, maybe it's 45 minutes, maybe it's a half an hour. And like, gosh, you don't want to, but it's like you eat the frog first thing, 8 o'clock in the morning. And you tell this to your coach that, hey, for the next week or 2 weeks or however long it takes in between your meetings, you're going to eat the frog. And what you're going to eat the frog in is for these and commit to something small first so it doesn't feel overwhelming. An hour and a half is going to be overwhelming to you to start. But if you could say 15 minutes, but like you don't turn on your computer to open up your emails or respond to things that are on fire, because you know what, you got 15 minutes. And whether you answer that email at 8 o'clock or 8:15, it's not going to make a difference,
true.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
if we really,
Absolutely.
I mean, because you know what, that thing may have happened at 1 o'clock in the morning. So, you're dealing with it at 8:15. Again, so I'm just, again,
No, I get it.
looking at it, we can make all these sorts of excuses. I will say this, over a year, there were maybe, and I'm going to actually stretch probably maybe two hands, but I'm going to say more likely one hand when it wasn't a vacation or I wasn't, away from the office where I missed that cold call session because I said it's that important. There was one client fire that I had to deal with a couple times, and I'm like, I just knew it, right? So it's kind of like when you're looking for a distraction, and whether like this is a legitimate fire. I really have to take care of this. I knew it was it. So again, 5, 6, maybe 7 times in a year that I missed that 8 to 9:30 call, and that was just it. And so like what I'm talking about today, like this is I actually gave this presentation to my client, to one of my clients last week, because I said we need to create a presentation like this for you, for your persona, and having this as a signature talk becomes a repeatable process.
Mm,
I spent 6 months on this, but like what you're saying to me right now is it's really valuable, right? Like,
yeah.
and if there's something that's missing, by all means, right? And or if something just didn't get to connect, but I ran it through a number of other Michaels, and the first couple were like, I don't understand what you're talking about, right? So it took that amount of time, yet now it's here because I'm like, I understand Michael, and I want to
Yeah.
share this with him, and I want to help Michael. And whether or not Michael and I work together or not, like this is still valuable information that can help them. And like you said, like, hey, this isn't now, and it might be 2 years from now, it might be a year from now. I don't know. the thing about it though is I'm big on relationship building,
Me too.
right? And that's what we've been talking about. So, feel free to ask any questions or whatever as you kind of come through this,
Yeah,
but
thank you.
I just want to leave you with those last couple of things because I think those are like those little things that you could get started, and I'm always a bigger fan of just starting smaller, giving
Yeah,
you the opportunity to make that. Because if you set yourself up for an hour and a half and you don't make it, then you're like, dang, you failed. You're gonna beat yourself up. Versus you scheduled 15 minutes and you did 30, like woohoo, you like doubled the
yeah,
amount of time, yet you did 15 minutes, right? And the key is whatever you set, do,
yeah,
and then just start to ramp it up. Like, okay, well, you know what, 15 minutes isn't enough. And I know I can put these things off, not put these things off, but I know this is priority. And my day can begin at 8:30 or 9 or whatever. And while I do my sales from 8 to 9:30, or I'm sorry, 8 to 8:30 or 8:30 to 9 or whatever. So,
right.
all right.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Really great insight. And likewise, if you ever need, reach out anytime if there's other things that you have questions about in terms of like what I might know of
Sure.
my everyday field of work,
Sure.
So line of work. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. I'll pass that link along to my brother and mention, just kind of briefly summarize
Yeah.
what we talked about and what you might be able to help him with.
Yeah.
And see.
Yeah, and have them download the guide to see, because
Yeah.
like that's a start. And then I even did, if you go onto the must knows guy, the must knows page on my site, there's a video down at the bottom, and it's like a 13-minute video where I dig into it a little bit deeper.
Oh, there's the video. I see it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of like, hey, you could download the guide here. Let me walk through what the guide is all about.
Okay.
So it's 13 minutes.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
no, that might just give them a little bit more content before this, because I'd love to do this same presentation with him and, let's kind of see where it connects with him.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Eric.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah. We'll be in touch. Yeah. I'll let you know how that goes with my brother.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks again. And then,
Welcome.
yeah, have a great rest of the week.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, and maybe what we'll do is, we could even reconnect here. Because I don't think we have anything else on scheduled. So maybe do you want to schedule something maybe like in September?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. How about, or we do a Thursday? Do you want to do like the same time?
Yeah, this time's just fine.
Okay.
Same time, yeah.
All right, great. I'll send you over the calendar link. So I'm going to send September 8th. Does that work?
Yeah, nothing. I know for sure.
Yeah,
So,
I'm like, that's a long time away. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, if you have something scheduled, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I definitely don't. All right, good. Here, so let me do that. And here you go. All right, well, all the best. And yeah, keep me in the loop on how the sales piece going.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah,
All
I'll
right.
keep track of you on Instagram too.
Awesome. All right, sounds good. Take
All right,
care.
you take care. All right,
All right, bye now.
see you. Bye.